Stephanie White's style of coaching is not for Caitlin Clark.
That there's a bit of a divide between the way that they see the game and the way that they think the Indiana Fever should play. Possibly try to sabotage the greatest asset the league has ever gotten.
Breaking news shakes the WNBA tonight. Stephanie White, head coach of the Indiana Fever, has officially been fired, and all signs point to her fractured relationship with rookie superstar Caitlin Clark. For weeks, fans whispered about sabotage, strange rotations, and Clark being sidelined in ways that made no sense. But after that disastrous July 10th meltdown against the Golden State Valkyries, it all came crashing down. The Fever were humiliated at home, and Clark, once the most electrifying player in the league, was reduced to a forgotten role player. This isn't just another coaching change. This is the fallout of a system that failed to unleash the league's brightest star. Tonight, we dig into what really happened, Clark's reaction, and what comes next.
Caitlin Clark's greatest asset, which is the creator and instigator of offense.
On July 10th, the Fever didn't just lose. They imploded. Final score, Valkyries 91, Fever 72. But it wasn't the loss itself that stunned fans, it was how it happened. Stephanie White benched Caitlin Clark from her natural role as playmaker, starting Ari McDonald at point guard. Suddenly, Clark, the #1 pick, the offensive engine, was parked in the corner like a role player. No pick and roll with Aaliyah Boston, no transition bursts, no chance to control the floor. Fans online erupted, asking if Clark was being sabotaged. For many, it was the last straw. Indiana's most dangerous weapon had been silenced, and the Fever looked like a team without identity.
Faded Caitlin Clark, for lack of a better way of putting it? Coach Stephanie White started Ari McDonald next to Caitlin Clark against the Valkyries, which again she explained by saying it helps to take the burden off of Caitlin.
When Caitlin Clark scored just 8 points in her highly anticipated return, the internet exploded. Not because she played poorly, but because she was never allowed to play her game. Fans accused Stephanie White of deliberately neutralizing Clark. Why is Caitlin Clark at small forward? One post read. Another called it the most confusing lineup in WNBA history. Even die-hard Fever supporters started threatening to boycott games. Attendance, merchandise, ratings, the very things Clark had revived, suddenly looked in danger. White's decisions weren't just unpopular. They were sabotaging the Fever's brand and the league's biggest star. For the Fever front office, this wasn't just bad basketball. This was business on the verge of collapse.
Fans online has been threatening to quit watching the Indiana Fever basketball. Fans is threatening to quit going to the games. And if this was to happen...
Instead of taking accountability, Stephanie White went to the press conference and lit a fire. She blasted her team, accusing players of lacking discipline, effort, and competitive fire. She said they ignored details and failed to execute. But here's what she didn't say: why she benched Clark from her playmaker role, why she dismantled the Clark-Boston pick and roll, or why the offense collapsed from the opening tip. To many fans, this wasn't just tone-deaf, it was deliberate. White spoke as if she had no hand in the disaster. But everyone watching knew the truth. Her system wasn't working, and the biggest star in women's basketball was being wasted.
Stephanie White under fire by Fever fans, she blasted her team after the squad's loss to the Golden State Valkyries.
Because I felt like there was a lack of competitive fire. With the exception of about 2 5-minute spurts, our attention to detail was poor.
This rift didn't appear overnight. Back on May 24th, after a close loss to the New York Liberty, Caitlin Clark made her feelings crystal clear. I'm best with the ball in my hands. That's when I'm most effective. Minutes later, Stephanie White gave a totally different take, praising Clark's off-ball cutting and screening instead. That philosophical divide never disappeared, it only grew louder. White insisted that Clark off the ball gave different looks. She even compared it to Luka Doncic sitting on the bench, saying the Mavericks move the ball better without him. Think about that. Comparing Clark, a generational playmaker, to someone who hurts their team by dominating the ball? That comment cut deep.
To the detail, on discipline. I felt like our energy and our competitive fire was not there, and that's disappointing.
Caitlin Clark isn't just a shooter. She isn't a decoy. She's a playmaker. At Iowa, she led the nation in both points and assists. She thrives when everything runs through her, when she bends defenses, creates magic, and controls the game. Fans show up because she can drop 30 points and 12 assists in one night. She is the system. But Stephanie White refused to see that. Instead, she shoved Clark into a corner role, stripped away her creativity, and dismantled the very chemistry with Aaliyah Boston that had worked so beautifully. It was like parking a Ferrari in a garage and asking it to play bumper cars. That's not just strategy, it's sabotage.
Concern, defensively, just lots of movement, lots of lateral movement. I thought she looked good at times, and I think that's just building consistency and building her endurance and all of that. So I was pleased.
So, that's an interesting...
Dig deeper, and the story gets even more troubling. Stephanie White was mentored by Carolyn Peck, who just days ago went on ESPN and claimed the Fever were better without Caitlin Clark. That wasn't just a hot take, it sounded like an agenda. White followed Peck to Vanderbilt, where she drove elite talent into the transfer portal and left the program in ruins. Now with the Fever, the same pattern emerged, a coach mismanaging star talent, alienating players, and unraveling locker rooms. Was this just bad coaching, or a belief system that Clark doesn't belong as the centerpiece? Either way, the damage was undeniable.
We've seen these glimpses where I do believe the Fever at their best can still be what I've talked about and what I've discussed. But
the Valkyries game was the breaking point. Clark was shoved off ball, Boston was invisible, and McDonald, who wasn't even in the WNBA 3 weeks earlier, was suddenly running the offense. It was chaos. The offense collapsed, the defense looked lifeless, and the Fever were embarrassed on their home floor. Fans, experts, and analysts alike called it malpractice. One analyst labeled White's system a point-forward mess, while others accused her of outright sabotaging Clark. By the end of that night, the whispers turned into screams. Stephanie White had to go.
Poof, the one thing that was in existence that actually worked, that felt like a little bit of something offensive that worked, gone.
Caitlin Clark isn't the type to blast her coach on social media. She's too professional. But listen closely to her words, and you hear the truth. After the Valkyries game, she said, "We need to do a better job of getting me the ball in transition. That's when I'm best." She's repeated that same line over and over this season. I'm best with the ball in my hands. That's not arrogance, that's reality. Yet her coach refused to listen. Every interview sounded like a cry for help. A star begging to be used the way she was born to play.
The fandom is in pure crash out mode. Somebody exposed.
When Clark described the Fever's collapse against the Valkyries, her choice of words stood out. She said, "We deflated." That's not just losing momentum. That's losing your soul. She admitted the defense was sloppy, that players didn't follow the scouting report, and that the energy vanished after the first run. But here's the thing, Clark took responsibility. She didn't point fingers. Meanwhile, her coach did the exact opposite. That contrast spoke volumes. The rookie star showed leadership, while the veteran coach showed deflection. The divide was widening, and the locker room could feel it. Most people compare Caitlin Clark to Steph Curry because of her deep shooting range. But in truth, she's closer to a LeBron or Luka, a heliocentric star who bends the game around her. She thrives when everything runs through her hands. That's why forcing her into a 3-and-D role felt so wrong. White didn't just misunderstand Clark, she insulted her game. Clark isn't a role player. She's the identity of the Indiana Fever. But White wanted balance, teamwork, a system where Clark blended in. The problem? The WNBA didn't explode in popularity this year because of system ball. It exploded because Clark creates pure magic. The Fever's front office wasn't blind. They saw the empty seats, the angry fans, the broken chemistry. But more importantly, they saw their greatest asset, the face of the WNBA, being wasted. Caitlin Clark sells out arenas coast to coast. She's the league's top jersey seller. She's the reason TV ratings are spiking. And here she was, looking miserable. For the Fever, it wasn't just about wins and losses anymore. It was about protecting their investment, their franchise player, and the future of the entire league. Something had to change. And fast. Stephanie White's struggles in Indiana weren't an isolated case. At Vanderbilt, she went 40, with multiple star players transferring out, citing poor management and lack of empowerment. History was repeating itself. Once again, elite talent was being stifled. Once again, a program was unraveling under her watch. For Indiana, that was the final proof. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a pattern. And with Caitlin Clark in the middle of it, the Fever could not afford to wait. The decision was clear. White was done. So how did Caitlin Clark react? True to her character, calm, professional, and focused. No angry tweets, no media theatrics. But insiders say she's relieved. Finally, the tug-of-war is over. Finally, she'll have a system built around her strengths. In her words, "I'm best with the ball in my hands." And now, the Fever are ready to give it back to her. This is Clark's team. Her future. Her era. And it's only just beginning. Without Stephanie White, the Fever are at a crossroads. But this isn't just about hiring a new coach. It's about building the entire identity of the team around Caitlin Clark. Early names floated include Mark Jackson and Bill Laimbeer, NBA minds with no agenda, just a winning mentality. Whoever it is, the mission will be simple: unleash Clark, unlock the Boston Clark connection, and let this young roster grow into something lethal. Because if one thing is clear after all this, it's the Caitlin Clark era now. And anyone who can't adapt, they'll get left behind.